All right, welcome to Croomskie's Corner, brought to you by RinkMasters Hockey. I have Prince George Cougars Head of Scouting, Bob Simmonds, on with me today, and we'll be taking a dive into the world of scouting, a little bit of player development, and then talking about the NHL playoffs coming up this weekend. Bob, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. 30 degrees out. What better topic than to be talking about hockey?
Your audio is cutting out a little bit there.
Yeah, okay. It's I'm not my internet. Sometimes I'm out in the country, so depending upon the time of day, it kind of can come and go. So
that's fair.
Cross our fingers.
Sounds good. All right. So yeah. So from our last interview on the RinkMasters podcast, you mentioned that you had played and coached before scouting. Where did you play and what were your experiences while playing, and what was your experience coaching?
Well, I played right up to junior. I always thought in the back of my head I was going to be a pro hockey player. Unfortunately, I wasn't quite good enough. One of my teammates from minor hockey, Jack McElhargy, just passed away. He was longtime NHL player, coach, scout, with the Philadelphia Flyers, longtime Vancouver Canucks. So I kind of aged myself. So I played my formative hockey, if you will, in the Lower Mainland, played in Coquitlam, and then my dad sent me over to the Burnaby Winter Club. So I played at the Burnaby Winter Club for a number of years. Was at the first Victoria Cougars training camp in 71 or 72. I'm really aging myself. And and then I played the junior for Bill Wilms in Vancouver. Bill does the color commentary for the Vancouver Giants. And then when I realized, I wasn't going to be a pro hockey player, I joined the RCMP. So I became a coach and coached whatever community I was stationed in at that time, and obviously continued to play hockey. Back in those days, the RCMP hockey or police hockey was very, very high level. Played senior hockey in a couple of different communities, and fast forward, right place, right time. Became involved in scouting because I was always around the rinks and had a good handle on who was who in the Edmonton area. And I started helping out the Cougars, and here we are 14 years later. I'm the head scout, if you will. So it's kind of been an interesting journey. I've been involved in hockey in some fashion pretty much since I've been 5 or 6 years old. So.
Yeah, that's something really cool. Like growing up around the game, like I know for myself, my grandpa used to own Played Again Sports here in Prince George, and at the time I think he said he used to supply equipment to the Cougars back in the day when the Broadskis owned the team, and so it's much the same thing for me growing up around the sport, and just every weekend at the rink, at the games, like Cougar games, just it's definitely a really cool vibe, cool atmosphere, and just being able to you meet so many awesome people in the hockey communities.
You do. The hockey world is a great environment to be involved in. Certainly at the level we're at, or I'm involved in now, all these young men are focused on becoming, pro hockey players, or, set themselves up into a situation where they're going to get some schooling, and but they're very focused, oriented, goal oriented, and very positive, and for the most part, moms and dads are very supportive, and it's a good world to be involved in for sure.
100%. And so, I mentioned it was like a right place, right time for you to get the job as a scout. So did you always, like in the back of your mind, like was it always I'm sure you always wanted to do something in hockey, but was it in specifically like being a head scout, or was it more just like that's just the opportunity that came up and it just was such a good fit?
Well, the reason I got formally involved in scouting, one of my very good friends is Terry Pesic, and his son Mark, now with the Florida Panthers. And so I would go with Terry to his son's games, back when Mark was in Pee Wee. And it became very apparent to me right early that, boy, this kid's a very, very special hockey player. Mark also played with a couple of other kids that stood out. Joe Morrow, who also drafted into the NHL. So I knew a couple of fellas that were involved in the Western Hockey League. So I was picking up the phone, calling them about players I was seeing, and so finally, after 4 or 5 phone calls, to this guy saying, "Hey, you got to watch this kid, you got to watch that kid," he just asked me if I was interested in scouting, and I said, "Well, I'm not sure what the time commitment would be and everything." And he starts to laugh and he says, "Well, really, you're sort of scouting now," but he said, "Prince George is looking for an Edmonton area scout, and here's the guy you call." So I phoned up Russ Smart, and Russ and I met, and inside of a couple of minutes, I listed off his 3 sons' names, and he's looking at me like, "Geez, how do you know my sons?" And I said, "Because I work with them. His sons were in the RCMP." So anyways, he just said, "Yeah, okay, come on board." And, my first few, but I, had a pretty good eye, and, had some success with respect to some players, and every year kind of got more and more responsibility, and then and here we are all those years later. So it's certainly worked out, and I couldn't be more happy that it has. So
It's definitely really cool to see how things worked out. It seems like one opportunity pops up, and then you take it, and then it can take you on a whole trajectory. It's pretty awesome.
yeah, well, a lot of life is good fortune, good timing, that kind of thing, and it's always. But again, I'd been involved in hockey, and I sort of knew what I was looking at when I was watching these young guys, and yeah, so here I am.
It's awesome. And looking back on your time scouting, like, do you have any stories, any experiences where you like scouting a player, you're interviewing, and it just kind of got to a point where it's like you knew, like, okay, you knew that this certain player, like, that was going to be a really good player, like the work ethic was there, just like role model. How often do you come across stories like that?
Well, the first player for me that comes to mind where I knew I was on to something was Troy Burke. Troy, I had watched in young Bantam, and he was playing in Spruce Grove, and there was just something about him. So, but towards the end of the season, he got quite sick, and so by the end of the year, I think he was worn down quite a bit, and he didn't have a strong Alberta Cup, and so I really had to state my case as to why Troy was, the player to draft, and we didn't draft him with our first pick that year, but we took him with our second pick. That was the 94s, I believe, if my memory serves.
Yeah, I
And
think that's right.
it was the next year. I met up with the team in Medicine Hat. They were on a road trip, and Brett Connolly came up to me and said, "Are you the guy that was responsible for getting Troy Burke drafted?" And I go, "Yeah." He said, "Good." He said, "Because that kid's a good player." And so right then, that was my first, like, "Oh, okay, yeah." I did well with that one, and but it's a real treat to go into the rinks and watch these young guys play, and right away when you see a special player, and even players that you're not going to be in an opportunity to draft, like Connor Bedard as an example. We knew he was going to go to Regina, but to be able to watch those kids, when they're 14 and 15, knowing that 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road you're going to be paying lots of money to watch. It's kind of neat to see them when they're just growing and maturing and whatnot, and then being able to say, to people, oh, I watched that kid when he was 13 years old, and now he's first line center in the NHL kind of thing. So
Yeah, that's definitely really cool. That'd be really
it's
cool
treat.
feeling.
It's a treat. It's a real treat.
Mhm. Well, I'm glad you brought up Troy Burke actually, because he was one of those players that he was one of my when I was younger. Like I'd go to the games. Troy Burke, he was fantastic. I loved watching Troy Burke. Like smooth skater. He read the play really well. I I couldn't believe honestly that Troy Burke was just so good because he kind of came into the league. I know when I was younger, you're watching the game like I when you're a kid, like you don't know these names, right? We're in Prince George. I'm like, well, where's Olds, Alberta? Like, I was trying to pinpoint it. He came in, and I was like, wow, like Troy Burke he was a talented hockey player.
Well, that Bantam team that Troy was on, there was another young guy in that team, Jaden Hart, who is also a pretty good player. And the first couple of viewings, you could teach they're both pretty equal. But Troy, managed very well without Jaden. Jaden seemed to need Troy a little more, but yeah, Berkey is he was a really good Prince George Cougar, and had some scoring records. I think Jansen Harkins subsequently broke them a couple of years ago. But I got Berkey's retro jersey sitting on my wall, and he's a great kid. He's a really good kid.
Oh, that's for sure. And based on like different styles of play, is there any when you're scouting, is there any specific programs that you typically would pay a little bit more attention to that maybe have more of like a successful history, or is it really do you just go where the talent is?
There's no doubt that some programs and academies seem to have a pretty good track record, but honestly, you never know where you're going to identify the sort of a prospect, a viable prospect. So you have to make sure that you see all programs and all teams. And, it's always more enjoyable to see certain teams play because the game is going to be good. But you got to get out and see every AAA Bantam team, every Bantam prep team, varsity teams, and if at all possible, and wherever possible, AA teams and whatnot, because you just never know. You never know. I was listening to your interview with Josh Mazer, and he was talking about playing hockey in Houston and going into Burns Lake and Fort St. James and getting beat because they weren't as good, but fast forward, and I'll bet you out of those games, Josh Mazer now is probably the only player that now has a pro contract. So you just never know. You just never know. So you have to get out there and you have to see the teams and you have to see the players.
There's definitely a whole different feel when you get to see players play like in person. I know Josh Mazer. I wonder because like Houston, like not many players come from a small town like that, and just to see that there was eyes in the arena that noticed it and got him drafted, got him to the right programs that helped him really get to this point where he can sign an AHL deal with Iowa.
Yeah, but it's a different world, and team to go to these high profile academies, Delta and Yale and OHA and all that kind of thing. So, but generally speaking, if you're a good hockey player, even if you're staying at home, the scouts are going to find you. My phone will ring and, it'll be somebody who was in a rink and just say, from Cold Lake, as an example, say, geez, I would just watch this kid. You need to see him when you get a chance. And so you're going to have to make an opportunity at some point in time during the hockey season to get out and see them. But a player from Cold Lake, if he wants to play in a AAA program, he's got to leave and come to Fort Saskatchewan. So it's a bit of a challenge, but certainly a lot of families seem to have the wherewithal to, send their sons away to, where they think their kids are going to get seen. But if you're a good hockey player, regardless of where you're physically located, generally speaking, I would say scouts are going to find you.
Actually, when you're talking about like there were like parents that get this and their kids like way early to those programs. It kind of made me think like maybe is that a bit of an advantage for like players coming out of those smaller markets where it's like they kind of move away earlier than normal to go to these programs to kind of get more out there. Does that kind of would that make for a smoother transition? Do you think into like the BCHL or the Western Hockey League or just a junior league up?
Well, it may help some young guys mature faster, if you will. But I'm a parent. It's sometimes interesting to see how quickly some of these young fellows got to leave home, and I'm not so sure in some cases that it's the best thing. But again, I fully subscribe to the theory: if you're a good player, regardless of where you're playing, you're going to be found and you're going to be seen. And the world and everything happens so fast. I'm not really a strong advocate for sending your 14-year-old child away thinking, Jesus, he's going to have a much better opportunity to become a pro hockey player. I'm not sure that that's necessarily the case, to be honest with you. It certainly in some cases it's beneficial and whatnot, but it's just, like I say, if you're a good player, you're going to be seen regardless of where you're at.
Yeah, it's definitely good to just play the game because you love it and not like to make it your to make moving decisions based on it all the time. I know I've seen some kids that I went to school with, and their parents like every life decision was based around like where their son was going to play. And I mean it can be a good thing, but I know sometimes I kind of wondered like, is that really a good thing because they're kind of losing their childhood in a sense there because you have to grow up so fast and it can be pretty intense.
Well, it certainly can, and I grew up in a era when hockey season was over. Hockey was over. Then you went and played lacrosse, you played soccer, you played baseball. Now hockey is almost a 12-month sport, if you will, and some of these young kids, they don't have an opportunity to play some other sports and get some other experiences. You look at some guys like Brendan Shanahan and Joe Nieuwendyk. I mean, they were world-class lacrosse players, and Wayne Gretzky certainly had other sporting interests outside of hockey when he was young. And so I do see, in some cases, kids get worn down and burnt out and whatnot, and but hockey is a different beast, and the world of hockey is a different beast than when I was a young guy growing up, trying to find my way. So
Yeah, it definitely has changed a lot, and that kind of segues into my next question. As even in my lifetime, I've seen like when I first started watching the game, it was a little slower. It was very like physical, hard-nosed hockey, and now it's so fast, and it's purely like it seems it's more purely speed and skill based rather than like that clutch and grab system. Does that would that necessarily kind of change the way that you would approach like scouting certain players, depending on how the trend of the game, or
well, not really, but you're right that, in saying the game of hockey is quite a bit different. Back in my day, you went to training camp to get into shape, kind of
yeah,
thing. And now, if you're not in shape when you arrive at training camp, there's a young buck taking your roster spot. So it's quite a bit different. And I mentioned to you in a previous conversation we had, the enjoyment of playing hockey, but wanting to be a hockey player is two different things. And so the kids today, though, the athleticism that they have, certainly the coaching is much better. The skill development. We had none of that. I can remember going to a hockey school, and I was geez, it was just midget, I guess, or band. I was first hockey school that I didn't even know what a hockey school was, but my dad says, "Yeah, you're going to this hockey school," and the next thing I know was you can teach at a hockey school, but now it's so totally different. It's so totally different. So, but it's a great game.
Definitely is. It's one of like my favorite game in the world for sure. And so, kind of moving on to more of the topic of like player development. So, like you go to again, you see so many games every season. You keep tabs on all these players, and if you had to create the ideal situation for a player to successfully just mature in his game and mature as on and off the ice, and just to really have the best chance to become, to reach their goals in hockey or in life, like what would that look like?
Well, obviously, you can tell players that are really dedicated and focused. They train a little differently. They perhaps go to a few less parties and stuff like that. So they're really dedicated to improving their skill set. Looking after their body. And training the right way and all that kind of stuff. So and most of these young guys that have this goal and dream and ambition, they're getting really good advice and guidance from a lot of sources, so that when they come, when they get their opportunity to compete for a roster spot in the Western Hockey League, they're ready. And so they're much easier to coach, much easier to work with, because they know what it takes. You have to be dedicated, and you also have to have a real passion for the game as well, because as we were just talking, hockey, you can be on the ice 11 months out of the year, and some kids will just, yeah, that's enough. I'm going to go to the lake this weekend, and but the guy who's going to say, no, I'm going to do that extra on ice session. Sometimes that's very telling.
Yeah, hard work and dedication can really pay off. I remember like just watching interviews from players that are playing in the NHL, and they talk about guys like Sidney Crosby and Yomer Jagr. Like they're always the last ones at the rink, and then the first ones in the gym. And it's cool to see, like, these players, they put in the work, they put in the dedication, they have the mindset of being like coachable and teachable, and you just can see where they can just completely take off to. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, coachable is very important, and obviously part of the scouting process is, we talk to the coaches, and
Mhm.
you get the feedback, uh, because there's so much more than just what you see on the ice.
Yeah,
But if a young man is like a sponge, and he'll soak everything in, and pay attention, and that's certainly a good thing. And it's easy to sort of find those kids. When you see it, you know that they're dialed in, and they're going to do whatever they can do to be the best they can be.
for sure. And yeah, it's always a crazy thing too. Like, you grow up around the rink, and you show up. I've played minor hockey my whole childhood, and you show up, and even in house league, like I know some of the guys, they would take it very seriously. It's like they just love to just do the best job that they can do, even if like the scouts aren't watching. And they're just like, oh yeah, we're gonna show up, we're gonna put in the work, we're gonna work hard at practice, we're gonna take really good care of ourselves. And I think it was just really cool to see that, because even if you're not, your goal isn't to like make make a pro career out of it, or like to even go far. It's just like, okay, like, I'm gonna work hard, and I'm just gonna be the best I can be, and I'm just gonna enjoy it.
Well, sometimes, if you have the opportunity as a scout to sneak into a hockey rink and nobody knows you're there, and you watch a team practice, and you watch, a certain player practice, it's interesting, because, oftentimes they'll know when a scout is in the rink to watch a game.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's nice to be there, and they have no idea you're there. So then you watch how they are on the ice, how they engage with their coach, how they conduct themselves in drills. Are they paying attention? Are they putting maximum effort in, or are they just goofing around, wasting time, that kind of thing? So there's many ways to sort of start nailing down kids that are dialed in, and want to be the best they can be, for sure.
Definitely. I think we should transition to the NHL talk. I know it's something I've been really itching about, and just seeing as the play-ins are coming up in the playoffs. The playoff, it's going to be crazy this year because COVID-19 has completely just changed the game. I feel like. Do you think maybe with all this the big pause, the 5 month break, that maybe it's gonna level out the playing field a little bit? Maybe it's gonna be less obvious on what like who the top team is gonna be and who the favorites are.
Well, the first thing I need to say is go Oilers, go. So, but from there, I think it's wide open. I think a lot of teams that may have had players nicked up, and they were getting ready for that playoff push, and now they've had some time to rest and recuperate. So I think it's going to be, even though you've got the 4 top seeds, and they kind of got a little maybe easier path, and you've got the other group doing the play-in rounds. But I really think when it's all said and done, the 24 teams that are in the 2 bubbles, I think all of them probably have a really good shot. But again, I think it's going to come down to goaltending, as it always does this time of year, and but I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be very competitive. Certainly a different experience without having the fans in the stands. But certainly from what I've seen with the exhibition games, the NHL's done a great job in having the 2 centers, set up in such a way that it looks good optically. And I think you're going to see some high level hockey for sure. I think all these guys are excited to get back on the ice after the break, and they probably all think they have a legitimate chance to win the Stanley Cup, and I believe they all do.
Yeah. Well, it's funny speaking of that, right? Because like I saw the highlight the other day where McDavid, he scored a really nice goal against Calgary, and it's another one of those no look goals. So you already know McDavid's ready to just go.
Yeah, and I think he was being, Connor was Connor, but I don't think he was going full out.
Oh no.
But yeah, he that goal was sick. Like he was looking off like he's passing all the way, and next thing you know, it's between Riddick. It's in his through his 5-hole. It was a typical Connor McDavid play. That kid's special. I'm fortunate enough that and I'm a season ticket holder for the Oilers, so I get to go watch him play. So he's a real treat, let me tell you.
Yeah. Well, I know you're an Oilers fan, so I mean, I think you're likely gonna pick them as the Stanley Cup winner here, hey?
Well, I'm hoping, but Chicago looked pretty good in their game against St. Louis. With Taves and Kane. You never know. The bottom line is, though, if Koskinen and Smith are better than Crawford, Oilers are good. They'll be fine. And to me, that's when you call this. I guess we'll call this playoff hockey. Playoff hockey is always the goalies that become the most important part of the team, it seems. And at the end of the day, if Koskinen and or Smith outplay the opposition goalie, the Oilers should be all right. And when you have McDavid and Draisaitl, that's pretty good.
Well, and that's what I'm most actually looking forward to, because I don't know, I look at all the teams in the playoffs right now. Like, they're good teams. Like, any team could win it, right? Like, everyone's got the talent, but when I think about Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, like the way they played all year, the plays that they could make, the amount of like high offensive threat chances they get, it's if they can really turn it up in the playoffs, I almost wonder if they like are they unstoppable in a sense, if you know what I'm saying? Like, just seeing the plays that they can make.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a team playing against them, you don't want to take a whole lot of penalties. I mean, they had the number 1 power play in the NHL, and you put McDavid and Draisaitl out there, and you got some pretty good other options, and their special teams can kill you. I mean, their power play is sick, and they've got a solid PK as well. So If Chicago ends up in the penalty box, they could be in trouble for sure. They've got to stay 5-on-5 as much as they possibly can, I think, to have a legitimate chance against Edmonton.
Oh, definitely. And it's crazy too, right? Because I kind of look out east and I see, Columbus and Toronto. A lot of people are like, "Oh, this is Toronto. Toronto's time to make it through." And I think a lot of people are sleeping on Columbus this year because I saw even before their exhibition game, I figured like the way that Tortorella really pushes his players, that he gets the most out of them. The defensive structure there is so solid. Their goaltending's been reliable. Again, like Korpisalo looked so slick in the exhibition game the other day. I almost wonder if like Columbus, if Korpisalo can keep that up and their defensive structure can really support them. If they're getting off timely offensive goals, I actually think I like Columbus quite a bit in the play-ins this year and in the playoffs.
Well, they had a very interesting regular season, and they were missing a lot of pieces from time to time. And I thought Tortorella did an unbelievable job coaching that group to getting them, getting them to where they are. And now they've had some time to heal and have their full roster and whatnot. That could be a very interesting play-in series for sure. But that'll be one to watch. It's interesting. I am anything but a Toronto Maple Leaf fan now.
Yeah.
When I was a young kid and it was the original six, there was nothing but the Toronto Maple Leaf. So
Yeah.
if Columbus were to defeat Toronto, it's not going to break my heart. Trust me.
Yeah, that's very fair. I know I have a lot of Toronto Maple Leafs fans, and when I mentioned the fact that I think Columbus is going to, shut them down in the play-ins this year, they got a little upset. But
well, it's going to be fun, down east. I mean, Tampa Bay is obviously going to try and right the wrong that happened last year. I mean, they were the odds-on favorite last year, and getting ousted in the first round was a bit of a shock. I'm sure Ovi would love to have his name on the cup a second time. How many more kicks at the cat is former Cougars Zdeno Chara going to have? Boston, I think, will be dialed in. So it's going to be fun to watch. There's no doubt, and and obviously I'll be focused on the Oilers for sure. But I'm going to watch as much of all those series as I possibly can for sure.
Yeah, no, I've definitely got my NHL Center Ice packages booked, so I'm locked in and ready. So, all right, like final guess. Like, if you had to pick a Stanley Cup final matchup, who would you have to pick?
Well, okay, so I'm just going to I'll remove Edmonton from the from the occasion because I would bet my heart with them for sure. It's always hard to go against the defending champions. Although St. Louis was underwhelming against Chicago the other day. Again, geez, they're a pretty good team. You look at Colorado and the group they have there, and I'm geez, I don't know. I think you're going to see Tampa Bay come out of the East. I think they got to burn their saddle based on how their season ended last year, and I'll go out in the rim and say Colorado and Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I could see that too. Again, like I got to do the same thing. I take my Dallas Stars hat off because I'd bet my money on Dallas. It might not be the right decision, but I'd bet my money on Dallas. If I had to pick,
I'd definitely put money on the Oilers, regardless of whether they're. It's just like I go down to Vegas and I put money on the Riders every year to win the Grey Cup. So
that's fair.
It is what it is.
Oh yeah, I would. Oh man, that's tough. I probably also I'm leaning between. I think Dallas out of the picture. I'm definitely leaning between Colorado and Vancouver. I think Vancouver is an interesting team. They're an intriguing team.
Yeah, it's interesting. Winnipeg. I watched that game the other day. A bit of controversy about Virtanen not being in the lineup, and what's going on there. But again, if their goalie is better than the other goalie, they've got a shot. And again, it's going to come down to goaltending for sure. And it's going to be interesting because there's no travel. These teams are all where they're at, and for the most part, they've eliminated sort of what you would call home ice advantage. I mean, the Oilers aren't going to be able to use their own dressing room when they're the visiting team. The same with Toronto, and so it's going to be interesting. These teams aren't going to have to get on planes and go back and forth between games and whatnot. So it's going to be interesting to watch for sure. It's fascinating, but I do think Tampa Bay will be very motivated to right what happened last year. And as much as I would love to see Chara win another cup, I would just say I think it's going to be Tampa's year, and Colorado is just, they're young and they're fast and they're good and they're skilled.
Well, it's crazy too, right? Because you look at Tampa Bay, like their exhibition game, they looked like a playoff team right off the bat. Like there was like you're just like, what's rust? Like they were just so good. They were.
Plus they got a coach that's got Prince George connections. So
yeah. It was pretty sweet. Yeah, I have to agree. I think Tampa Bay definitely is the team that's going to come out of the East, and for me, it's a toss between Vancouver and Colorado out in the West.
Well, it's funny. I grew up out on the coast, and went to a lot of Canuck games when I was really young, and I'm not much of a Canuck fan.
That's fair.
Never have been. Even when I lived there, and I don't know why. And it's funny, when I was a young kid, Orland Kurtenbach was my neighbor, and of course Kurtenbach was the captain of the Canucks way back when, and my dad was quite a Canuck fan, but I like the uniforms though. I liked the original uniforms anyway, but I never warmed up to the Canucks. Although I did when McElhargy came over and became a Canuck, I because Jack was I grew up in Burnaby with him and played hockey with him, so I was a bit of a fan when he was there.
That's definitely fair. Yeah, it's crazy actually, because like being in BC, like up here, my entire family, they're all diehard Canucks fans, right? And it's just like I grew up with the Canucks fans, so I cheered for the Canucks as a kid. I get older. And the next thing it's like, I'm not really actually a Canucks fan. Like it's not like I don't like them. Like I appreciate them as a team, but it's like I kind of like Dallas. And my parents always ask me, they're like, why do you like Dallas? Like what draws you to Dallas? It's like, honestly, I just like the way that they play. And then it just kind of grew on me. And then I liked their colors. The uniforms were great. And a lot of my favorite players from even back then were just Dallas Stars players, right? Like Mike Modano was one of my favorite players, and I liked Eddie Belfour, and just the way that they played the game, I just liked it. Like they were just so physical.
Well, back in the 90s, when I was first a season ticket holder, some of those playoff series, Dallas and Edmonton, Doug Waite versus Mike Modano, Ken Hitchcock versus Ron Lowe. It was great. It was unbelievable, and there were some unbelievable series. And when I think about the Edmonton Oilers fans getting on Belfour, and now they would Belfour, it was a lot of fun. And I watched with interest some of the replays of some of those old games, and I actually PDR'd Todd Marchand's winning goal in Game 7 against Andy Moak. Nice. I think it was Ledyard that kind of blew a wheel there, and Marchand went by him. But yeah, there was. I have so Richard Mravchuk I know very well, obviously, and many years ago when Matty was still playing with the Dallas Stars, so I knew Matty's mom very, very well, and so I would always get stuff from Matty from Dallas for Stars, silent auctions, and this, and then I'd buy it all, at these auctions. So Tyler, my house is full of Dallas Stars stuff, Medano stuff,
That's awesome.
Darian Hatcher stuff, Richard Matvichuk signed jersey, and so I get all this stuff donated, and then I bid on it and end up owning it.
That's pretty awesome. That's really cool. All right. Well, man, I'm running out of time here. I've got to get on with my day, but thank you for coming on, and it's really great to talk to you again, and definitely, I mean, I'll definitely have you on again in the future as well.
Well, listen, the next time I'm in Prince George, obviously it'll be whenever training camp is. Let's look up.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love that. Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Sounds good, man.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Tyler.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This concludes my interview with Bob Simmonds of Prince George Cougars. The second episode of Croomskie's Corner was brought to you by RinkMasters Hockey. So go follow RinkMasters on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you next week. Bye for now.